The front door slammed shut with a finality that echoed not just through the empty house, but through the very core of my being. The cold, unforgiving click of the lock was the sound of my life collapsing. I stood on the porch, a flimsy backpack slung over one shoulder, the biting autumn wind whipping my hair across my face, stinging tears already blurring my vision. "Don't come back, Eleanor, not until you learn some respect." My mother's voice, sharp and venomous, pierced through the wood. My father's silence, as always, was even louder. He was her enabler, her silent accomplice in every act of cruelty. Respect. That was their favorite word. It was their weapon, wielded whenever I dared to express an opinion contrary to theirs, whenever I failed to meet their impossibly high, ever-shifting standards. I was 19, just starting college, dreaming of a future far removed from their suffocating control, and that, it seemed, was my cardinal sin. The argument had started over something trivial, my choice of major, my refusal to attend some stuffy family dinner. It escalated, as it always did, into a torrent of insults, accusations, and finally, the ultimate threat: get out. And I did, because what choice did I have? My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My breath hitched in my throat, each gasp painful. I clutched the straps of my backpack, containing little more than a change of clothes, my phone, and a few tattered books. No money, no car, nowhere to go. The streetlights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows, mirroring the contorted landscape of my life. I was truly, utterly alone. The first few nights were a blur of terror and desperation. I couch-surfed with a friend for 2 nights, but her tiny apartment was already overflowing, and I couldn't bear to be a burden. After that, it was the bus station, the park bench, the cold, unforgiving concrete. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every rustle of leaves sounded like approaching danger. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, a constant dull ache that grew sharper with each passing hour. The shame was a heavy cloak, wrapping me in its suffocating folds. How could my own parents do this to me? How could they cast their only child out into the cold, unforgiving world? My mind drifted back to my grandfather, Arthur Vance. He was my rock, my only source of unconditional love in a family that seemed to thrive on conditions. Grandpa Arthur had passed away 2 years ago, leaving behind a void that no one else could fill. He was a quiet man, a history professor, always with a twinkle in his eye and a fascinating story to tell. He taught me to play chess, to love classic literature, and most importantly, to believe in myself, even when my parents chipped away at my self-worth. After he died, my parents had quickly sorted through his belongings, selling most of his antique furniture and books, claiming they needed the space and the money. I'd been allowed to keep only a small, unassuming wooden box, filled with old letters, a worn leather-bound journal, and a few trinkets that had no monetary value, but held immense sentimental worth for me. It was all I had left of him. One particularly brutal night, huddled in a corner of an abandoned bus shelter, shivering uncontrollably, the wind whistling through the broken windows, I remembered that box. It was tucked deep inside my backpack, a small comfort in the vast emptiness of my existence. I pulled it out, my fingers numb with cold, and began to sift through its contents. Old photos, a pressed flower, a foreign coin. Then my fingers brushed against something hard and rectangular, tucked beneath a stack of letters. I pulled it out. It was an old bank card. Not one of the sleek, modern plastic cards, but an older, thicker version, with a faded magnetic strip and an embossed name, Arthur Vance. Below his name, a series of numbers, and then the words, International Platinum Account. My heart gave a strange lurch. An international platinum account? Grandpa Arthur was a professor, not a millionaire. He lived modestly, drove an old sedan, and always seemed to be careful with his money. Was this some kind of joke? A relic from another time, another life? Still, a desperate, illogical spark of hope flickered within me. What if? What if there was something, anything, enough for a hot meal, a night in a cheap motel, just to escape the gnawing cold and the crushing despair? The next morning, fueled by a half-eaten bagel I'd found near a trash can, I made my way to the nearest branch of the bank whose logo was emblazoned on the card. It was a grand building, all polished marble and gleaming brass, intimidating and opulent. I felt utterly out of place, my threadbare clothes and disheveled appearance a stark contrast to the impeccably dressed patrons and staff. My stomach churned with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. What if they laughed at me? What if they called security? This was probably a lost cause, a fool's errand born of desperation. I approached the customer service desk, my voice barely a whisper when I finally spoke. "Excuse me," I began, holding out the old card, my hand trembling slightly. "I found this. It belonged to my grandfather. I was wondering if there's anything on it." The young woman behind the desk, with her perfectly coiffed hair and crisp uniform, gave me a polite but dismissive smile. She took the card, her eyes flickering over my worn jacket with a barely perceptible hint of disdain. "An old account, huh? Let me see." She slid the card into a reader, typed a few things, and then frowned. It's not pulling up in our regular system. Looks like a very old account, maybe even inactive. I'll need to send you to Mr. Henderson, our branch manager. He handles dormant accounts and legacy clients." She gestured vaguely towards a glass-walled office at the back.
My heart sank. Inactive meant empty, or worse, closed. But at least I wasn't being laughed out of the bank. I shuffled towards Mr. Henderson's office, my worn sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished floor. Mr. Henderson was a portly man in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a receding hairline. He looked up from his computer, adjusting his glasses. "Eleanor Vance, I presume? Please, have a seat." He gestured to the plush leather chair opposite his desk. I sat, feeling like an imposter in a scene from a movie. I handed him the card, explaining, "It was my grandfather's, Arthur Vance. He passed away a couple of years ago. I just found it, and I was just hoping maybe there's enough for, a meal?" I felt my cheeks flush with shame as I admitted my dire situation, even indirectly. Mr. Henderson nodded sympathetically. "Arthur Vance, you say? A name I haven't heard in a while. A very private client." He took the card, examining it closely. "Yes, this is indeed an international platinum account. Very rare, very exclusive." He then inserted it into a more sophisticated-looking card reader, his fingers flying across his keyboard, entering various codes and authenticating details. My gaze was fixed on his face, trying to read any sign, any flicker of information. His brow furrowed in concentration, then his eyes widened slightly. He typed something else, then leaned closer to the screen, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to utter disbelief. His hand, resting on the desk, began to tremble. His mouth fell open, a silent O of shock. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and unblinking, as if he were seeing a ghost, or perhaps a mirage. He swallowed hard, cleared his throat, and then stammered, "Miss Vance, Eleanor, are you aware of the balance on this account?" My breath caught. "No, sir. I have no idea. Is there anything at all?" I braced myself for disappointment, for the inevitable news that it was empty. Mr. Henderson slowly pushed his monitor around so I could see it, and there, on the screen, in bold, stark numbers, was a figure that made my vision swim. It wasn't hundreds, it wasn't thousands, it wasn't even millions. It was $1,234,789.56. $1.2 billion. My mind simply refused to process it. It was a string of numbers, meaningless, impossible. My jaw dropped. I stared at the screen, then at Mr. Henderson, then back at the screen. "A billion?" I whispered, the word tasting alien on my tongue. Mr. Henderson nodded, still in a state of shock himself. "Yes, Miss Vance, $1.2 billion and 56 cents. He let out a nervous laugh. "Your grandfather was quite the investor and very, very discreet. This account was set up years ago with a complex web of international investments. It has been growing steadily, untouched, for decades. We've been trying to locate you, his sole heir, for some time, but he had very specific instructions for how and when the account could be accessed after his passing. It seems the system was designed to only release information if the physical card was presented by the designated heir. A very clever man, your grandfather." The world tilted. The cold, the hunger, the fear, the shame, all of it vanished, replaced by an overwhelming wave of incredulity and a strange, almost terrifying sense of power. I was a billionaire. Me, Eleanor Vance, the girl who had been kicked out by her parents, who had slept on park benches, who had barely enough money for a cup of coffee. It felt like a dream, a cruel hallucination. I don't understand, I stammered, my voice cracking. Why didn't he ever say anything? Why did he live so modestly? Mr. Henderson offered a small, knowing smile. Your grandfather was a man of principle, Miss Vance. He believed in earning one's way, in the value of hard work, not inherited wealth. He built this fortune, yes, but he never let it define him. He lived a life of intellectual pursuit, not luxury. I imagine he wanted you to discover your own path, to build your own character before this revelation. He left a sealed letter with us to be given to you upon accessing the account. He opened a drawer and produced a thick, cream-colored envelope addressed to me in Grandpa Arthur's familiar, elegant script. My hands trembled as I took it, my eyes welling up with tears, not of sadness, but of profound love and gratitude. I opened the letter, my fingers tracing the familiar handwriting. Grandpa Arthur's words flowed from the page, a voice from beyond the grave, warm and comforting. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means you have found the key. I always knew you would. I have watched you grow, my bright, inquisitive girl, and I have seen the challenges you face. I know your parents, and I know their ways. This fortune is not merely money, it is freedom. It is the chance for you to live a life unburdened by their expectations, to pursue your passions, to make a difference in the world. I never told you about it because I wanted you to forge your own strength, to understand the value of $1, and to experience the world without the distorting lens of immense wealth. Now you are ready. Use this wisely, my dear. Do good, be kind, and never forget the lessons I tried to teach you. All my love, Grandpa Arthur.
Hot tears streamed down my face, blurring the words. He knew. He had always known. He had prepared me, in his quiet, gentle way, for this very moment. He hadn't just left me money. He had left me a legacy of wisdom and love. The weight of the past few weeks, the humiliation, the cold, the hunger, all melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of profound relief and an almost dizzying surge of hope. Over the next few days, my life transformed with a speed that was almost surreal. Mr. Henderson, along with a team of the bank's top financial advisors and lawyers, guided me through the complex process of setting up new accounts, understanding the portfolio, and establishing trusts. I moved into a luxurious hotel suite, where I took the longest, hottest shower of my life, scrubbing away the grime and the despair of the streets. I ate real food, not just to satisfy hunger, but to savor every delicious bite. I bought new clothes, not designer labels, but comfortable, warm garments that made me feel human again. My first priority was to help others. I couldn't forget the cold, the fear, the gnawing hunger I had experienced. I started by donating a significant sum to local homeless shelters and soup kitchens, ensuring they had enough resources to help others who, like me, had fallen through the cracks. I established a foundation in Grandpa Arthur's name, dedicated to supporting education and arts programs for underprivileged youth, causes he deeply believed in. The money wasn't just for me, it was for doing good. The question of my parents, however, lingered. The pain they had inflicted was deep, a wound that wouldn't heal overnight. I knew I couldn't just forget what they had done, but I also knew that direct, vengeful confrontation wouldn't bring me true peace. My revenge, I decided, would be living my best life, a life they could never control, a life that proved their cruel judgment of me utterly wrong. It would be a quiet, dignified triumph. Word, as it always does, eventually got out. It started subtly, a whisper here, a rumor there. A local newspaper ran an article about a mysterious young benefactor making large donations to community programs, hinting at a connection to a long-dormant, incredibly wealthy family estate. My name wasn't explicitly mentioned, but it was enough. My parents, ever attuned to social standing and financial gossip, must have heard the whispers. I imagined their conversations, their frantic attempts to piece together the puzzle. Then came the calls. First, a tentative text from my mother. "Eleanor, darling, are you all right? We've been so worried." Darling. The word tasted like ash. I ignored it. Then more insistent calls, from both of them. Voicemails filled with feigned concern, then thinly veiled accusations of abandonment, followed by increasingly desperate attempts to reconnect. "We've heard rumors, Eleanor. Is there something you want to tell us?" The greed was palpable, seeping through their carefully constructed facade of parental concern. I finally decided to respond, not with anger, but with a cold, detached civility that I knew would cut them deeper than any shouted word. I had my lawyer draft a letter, a formal, legalistic document stating that I was well, that I wished them no ill will, but that I required space and privacy. It also explicitly stated that any future contact should be through my legal counsel. It was a clear, unambiguous boundary, a wall built not of brick and mortar, but of unshakable resolve. Their reaction was exactly as I had anticipated: outrage, then confusion, then desperate attempts to circumvent my lawyer, which were, of course, futile. I heard through the grapevine from a distant relative that they were beside themselves. They couldn't fathom how their disrespectful daughter, whom they had cast out, had suddenly become a person of immense wealth and influence. The irony was exquisite. They had wanted me to be dependent, to crawl back to them, but instead, I had soared. I never saw them again in person. I occasionally caught glimpses of them at charity galas or social events, where I was now a prominent figure. Their eyes would always find mine across the crowded room, filled with a mixture of shock, regret, and a hunger that was almost sickening. But I would simply offer a polite, distant nod, a ghost of a smile, and turn away. Their opportunity to be part of my life, to share in my joy and success, had vanished the moment they slammed that door in my face. My life, once defined by insecurity and their constant disapproval, was now boundless. I finished my degree, not in the major they had dictated, but in art history, a field I truly loved. I traveled the world, not as a tourist, but as someone eager to learn, to experience, to contribute. I invested in sustainable technologies, supported struggling artists, and continued to pour resources into education and homelessness initiatives. I built a life that Grandpa Arthur would have been proud of, a life of purpose and compassion, tempered with the quiet strength he had instilled in me. The money was a gift, yes, an incredible stroke of luck. But the true fortune was the freedom it bought me, the ability to be truly myself, unburdened by the past. The cold nights on the streets, the gnawing hunger, the despair, they were painful memories, but they were also powerful teachers. They reminded me of the resilience within me, the strength I didn't know I possessed, and they fueled my desire to ensure that fewer people had to endure what I had. Sometimes, late at night, I would hold Grandpa Arthur's old bank card, tracing the faded letters of his name. It was more than just a piece of plastic. It was a symbol of his enduring love, his quiet genius, and the profound justice that had, against all odds, found its way to me. My parents had tried to break me, to diminish me, but in their cruelty, they had inadvertently set me free. And that freedom, more than any $1 billion, was the greatest treasure of all.